The rain fell like tears from heaven as Elias Granger stood beside her mother's casket, watching the last person she loved being lowered into the cold ground. The black dress clung to her trembling frame, and mascara traced dark lines down her cheeks. She had lost everything now, her mother, her anchor, her safe harbor in life's storms. But nothing could have prepared her for what happened next. Elias. The voice behind her was cold, calculated. She turned to see her husband of 22 years, Robert, standing with an envelope in his hand. His face showed no emotion, no grief for the woman who had welcomed him into the family with open arms. Behind him stood their 2 children, Thomas, 24, and Rachel, 22, both avoiding her eyes. "Not now, Robert," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please. Not today." But he stepped forward anyway, pressing the envelope into her shaking hands. "This can't wait," he said with the same tone he used in business meetings. "I'm sorry it has to be this way, but you need to know." Elias's fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. The words on the legal document hit her like a physical blow. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce papers. At her mother's funeral. In front of everyone. The world seemed to stop spinning. The mourners who had come to pay their respects now stood frozen, watching this private family drama unfold beside an open grave. Whispers started like wildfire, spreading through the crowd of relatives, friends, and neighbors. "You're divorcing me?" she gasped, looking up at the man she had loved since college. "Today? Right now?" Robert's jaw tightened. "I wanted to wait, but my lawyer said we needed to serve these before the end of the month for tax purposes. You'll understand when you read through everything." Thomas stepped forward, his young face hard with an anger that seemed too old for his years. "Mom, we know what you did," he said, his voice carrying across the cemetery. "We know about the money you've been hiding. About the lies." Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face, but not tears of grief for her grandmother. These were tears of betrayal, of hurt, of choosing sides. "We can't live with what you've done to this family," she said. "We're staying with Dad." Elias felt her legs give way. She stumbled backward, the divorce papers scattering in the wind like autumn leaves. Her children, her babies, were looking at her like she was a stranger. Like she was the enemy. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "What money? What lies?" But they were already walking away. Robert, Thomas, and Rachel moved together like a unit, leaving her standing alone beside her mother's grave. The mourners began to disperse, uncomfortable with the scene they had witnessed. Some offered quiet condolences as they passed, but most just hurried away, eager to escape the awkwardness of family destruction. Elias sank to her knees on the wet grass, picking up the scattered papers with numb fingers. The legal language swam before her eyes, but certain phrases jumped out: irreconcilable differences, division of assets, custody arrangements. There was mention of hidden accounts, of financial irregularities, of breach of trust. None of it made sense. She had never hidden money. She had never lied to her family. She had spent her entire adult life building their business, raising their children, being the perfect wife and mother. And now they were painting her as some kind of criminal. As the cemetery emptied and the groundskeepers began to fill in her mother's grave, Elias remained on her knees in the mud. The rain had soaked through her black dress, and her hair hung in wet strands around her face. She looked like a broken woman, defeated and abandoned. But appearances could be deceiving. Deep in her chest, beneath the grief and shock, something else was stirring. It was cold and sharp and patient. It was the same feeling she had gotten 3 months ago when she first discovered Robert's betrayal. The same feeling that had kept her quiet, planning, preparing for exactly this moment. Because while Robert thought he was 10 steps ahead, serving her papers at the most vulnerable moment of her life, he had no idea that Elias had been 20 steps ahead all along. She knew about Rebecca, his secretary. She knew about the affair that had been going on for over a year. She knew about the money he had been moving, the accounts he had been opening, the lies he had been telling their children to turn them against her. Most importantly, she knew something he didn't, something that would change everything. Elias slowly got to her feet, smoothing down her wet dress. She folded the divorce papers carefully and placed them in her purse. Then she walked to her mother's grave and placed a single white rose on the fresh earth. "I promise you, Mama," she whispered to the headstone. "They won't get away with this. Not today, not ever." As she walked away from the cemetery, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her lawyer. "Everything is in place. Ready when you are." Elias smiled for the first time in months. Let Robert think he had won. Let him believe his cruel timing and calculated betrayal had broken her spirit. Tomorrow he would learn the true meaning of being outplayed. The game was just beginning, and Elias Granger never lost at games that mattered. 3 months earlier, Elias had been living in what she thought was a perfect marriage. She woke up every morning in their beautiful suburban home, made coffee for her husband of 22 years, and went to work at the company they had built together from nothing. Granger Industries had started as a small consulting firm in their garage. Elias had been the one with the business degree, the contacts, and the vision. Robert had the charm and the sales skills. Together, they had grown it into a multi-million-dollar operation with offices in 3 states. But on that Tuesday morning in April, everything changed. Elias had forgotten her presentation files at home and driven back to get them. The house should have been empty. Robert was supposed to be in meetings all day, and the kids were both living in their own apartments now. She used her key quietly, not wanting to disturb anyone if Robert had come home sick. But as she climbed the stairs to their home office, she heard voices. Robert's voice and another voice she recognized. Rebecca Martinez, his secretary. The young woman Elias had hired herself just 18 months ago. "We can't keep doing this," Rebecca was saying. "She's going to find out eventually." "No, she won't," Robert replied, and there was something in his voice Elias had never heard before. Something tender and intimate. Elias is too trusting. Too focused on the business to notice what's happening at home. Elias pressed herself against the wall outside the office door, her heart pounding so loud she was sure they could hear it. "But what about the money?" Rebecca continued. "Moving all those funds around, if she finds out about the offshore accounts?" "She won't. I've been handling all the finances for years. She signs whatever I put in front of her. By the time she realizes what's happening, it will be too late." "And the children? Thomas and Rachel?" Robert's laugh was cold and calculating. "They're adults now. They understand that their mother has been difficult, controlling. They know she's been taking money out of the company for her own projects. They'll side with me when the time comes." Elias felt the floor drop out from under her. Taking money for her own projects? She had never taken a penny from the company that wasn't rightfully hers. Every investment, every expenditure had been discussed and agreed upon. Or so she thought. "I love you," Rebecca whispered. "I love you too," Robert replied. "Soon we'll be together properly. Without having to sneak around. The divorce papers are almost ready." Elias backed away from the door, her mind reeling. Divorce papers? He was planning to divorce her? After 22 years of marriage, after building a life and a business together, after raising 2 children? She made it downstairs and out of the house without being detected. In her car, she sat in the driveway for 10 minutes trying to process what she had just heard. Her husband was having an affair. He was planning to divorce her. He was moving money around behind her back. And somehow, he had convinced their children that she was the one who couldn't be trusted. The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt most was the realization that this had been going on for months, maybe longer. All those late nights at the office. All those business trips. All those times Rebecca had smiled at her so sweetly, so innocently. Elias drove to the office in a daze. She went through the motions of her day, attending meetings, reviewing contracts, managing the business she had poured her heart into. But her mind was elsewhere, putting together pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed. That evening, she sat across from Robert at dinner as he told her about his day. He looked her straight in the eye and lied about where he had been, what he had done, who he had seen. He was so smooth, so convincing. How many other lies had she believed over the years? "You're quiet tonight," he said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "Everything okay?" She looked down at his hand covering hers, the same hand that had touched another woman just hours earlier, and felt nothing but disgust. But she managed to smile. "Just tired," she said. "Long day at the office." He nodded sympathetically. "You work too hard, babe. Maybe you should think about stepping back a little. Let me handle more of the business side of things." Now she understood. He wanted her to step back so he could have complete control. So he could manipulate the finances without her oversight. So he could paint her as an absent, disinterested partner when the divorce proceedings began. That night, as Robert slept beside her, Elias stared at the ceiling and made a decision. She wouldn't confront him. She wouldn't scream or cry or beg him to stop. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her broken. Instead, she would do what she did best. She would plan. She would investigate. She would gather evidence. And when the time was right, she would strike back with everything she had. She slipped out of bed and went to her laptop. If Robert thought he could outmaneuver her in business, he was about to learn how wrong he was. Elias Granger hadn't built a multi-million-dollar company by being naive or trusting. She started with the company's financial records, looking for the irregularities Robert and Rebecca had mentioned. It didn't take long to find them. Transfers to accounts she didn't recognize. Expenses that didn't make sense. Money moving in patterns that looked suspiciously like someone was trying to hide assets. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Dad says you've been acting weird lately. Are you okay?" Even her own son was being turned against her. Robert was already planting seeds, already building his case. But two could play that game. Elias typed back, "Just dealing with some business issues. Nothing for you to worry about. Love you." She meant it. She did love her children, which made their eventual betrayal even more painful. But she was beginning to understand that this wasn't just about an affair or even a divorce. This was about destroying her completely, her reputation, her relationship with her children, her financial security. Robert wanted to take everything from her. But he had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated the woman he had married. The woman who had turned a garage startup into an empire. The woman who had never lost a fight that really mattered. As the clock struck midnight, Elias opened a new document on her computer and began typing. She had 3 months until her mother's funeral, though she didn't know that yet. 3 months to build her case, to protect her assets, to prepare for war. The game was about to begin, and Elias Granger intended to win. The next morning, Elias woke up before dawn and did something she hadn't done in years. She went to the office before anyone else arrived. She used her key to enter the building and made her way to the executive floor, where the company's most sensitive files were kept. If Robert was moving money around, there would be a paper trail. There always was, no matter how careful someone thought they were being. Elias had built this business from the ground up, and she knew every system, every process, every way money could move through the company. She started with the bank statements. Granger Industries had accounts with 3 different banks, and Elias had signing authority on all of them. But as she pulled up the online banking records, she found accounts she didn't recognize. Accounts that required only Robert's signature. Her heart sank as she traced the money flows. Over the past 18 months, Robert had been systematically moving funds from their joint business accounts into these new accounts that only he controlled. Not huge amounts at first, a few thousand here, a few thousand there. But it added up to nearly $500,000. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how he had documented these transfers. According to the records, they were payments to E. Granger Consulting for special projects and business development. He was making it look like she was the one taking money out of the company for her own use. Elias printed everything, her hands shaking with anger. He wasn't just stealing from their business, he was framing her for theft. When the divorce proceedings began, he would point to these records as evidence that she couldn't be trusted with the company's finances. She heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly shut down the computer. By the time Rebecca arrived at the office, Elias was sitting in her own office, apparently reviewing contracts like any other morning. "You're here early," Rebecca said, standing in the doorway with a cup of coffee and that same innocent smile that now made Elias's skin crawl. "Couldn't sleep," Elias replied without looking up. "Big presentation today." Rebecca lingered for a moment as if she wanted to say something else, but then moved on to her own desk. Elias watched her through the glass walls of her office, this young woman who was helping to destroy her life. Rebecca was 28, fresh out of business school, ambitious and smart. Elias had seen potential in her, had mentored her, had trusted her. The betrayal stung, but Elias pushed the emotion aside. She had work to do. That afternoon she called her personal lawyer, Patricia Chin. They had worked together on various business deals over the years, and Elias trusted her completely. "I need to see you," Elias said when Patricia answered. "Privately. Not at your office." They met at a small cafe across town, far from anywhere Robert might see them. Elias laid out everything she had discovered, the affair, the financial manipulation, the divorce papers that were apparently being prepared. Patricia listened without interruption, taking notes on her tablet. When Elias finished, the lawyer was quiet for a long moment. "This is serious," Patricia finally said. "If he's been moving company assets without your knowledge, that's potentially fraud. And if he's documenting it to make you look guilty, can we stop him?" Elias asked. "We can try. But first we need more evidence. And we need to protect you. If he's been planning this for months, he probably has other strategies in place." Patricia recommended a private investigator she had worked with before. A woman named Detective Sarah Kim who specialized in financial crimes and marital fraud. Within a week, Sarah was following Robert and Rebecca, documenting their affair and investigating the financial irregularities. Meanwhile, Elias continued to play the role of the unsuspecting wife. She went to dinner with Robert, attended company meetings with Rebecca, and smiled through it all. But every night she was building her case. She discovered that Robert had been telling people she was having mental health issues. He had mentioned to their accountant that she had been making erratic financial decisions and might need to step back from active management of the company. He had told their lawyer that she had been acting paranoid and might need professional help. The groundwork for his betrayal had been laid carefully, methodically, over many months. He was painting a picture of a woman who was unstable, unreliable, and possibly stealing from her own company. When the divorce papers were served, he would look like the reasonable spouse trying to protect their business and their children from an unstable woman. But Elias wasn't unstable. She was strategic. And she was learning to play a game she had never wanted to learn. She opened her own private bank account, one that Robert knew nothing about. She started moving some of her personal assets, jewelry, artwork, investments, into places where he couldn't touch them. She made copies of every important document and stored them in a safety deposit box he didn't know about. Most importantly, she began documenting everything. Every lie he told, every meeting he had with Rebecca, every dollar that moved through those hidden accounts. She was building a case that would protect her when the war began. 2 months into her investigation, Sarah the private investigator called with an update. "Your husband and his secretary have been house hunting," Sarah reported. "They're looking at properties in the next state over. Expensive properties. Properties that would require a lot more money than either of them makes from their current salaries." "He's planning to leave town," Elias realized. "Take the money and start over somewhere else." "It looks that way. But there's something else. I've been digging into Rebecca Martinez's background. Her employment history isn't what it appears to be." "What do you mean?" "She was fired from her last 2 jobs. Both times for financial irregularities. Your husband either didn't do a proper background check when he hired her, or he knew about her history and hired her anyway." Elias felt a chill run down her spine. Robert hadn't just fallen into an affair. He had deliberately chosen a partner who was experienced in financial manipulation. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a carefully planned heist. That night, as she lay beside her cheating husband, Elias made a decision. She wouldn't wait for him to serve her divorce papers. She wouldn't let him choose the time and place of their confrontation. She would take control of the situation. But she needed one more piece of the puzzle. She needed to know exactly how he planned to turn their children against her. The answer came the next week, when she overheard a phone conversation between Robert and Thomas. "Your mother has been acting very strange lately," Robert was saying. "I'm worried about her mental state. She's been making some questionable business decisions, and I think she might be taking things that don't belong to her." Thomas sounded concerned. "What kind of things?" "Money mostly. From the company. I've tried to talk to her about it, but she gets defensive. Angry. I think she might need professional help. Should we do an intervention or something? I don't know yet. But I want you and Rachel to be prepared. If things get worse, we might need to take action to protect the business. And to protect her from herself." Elias felt sick. Robert was positioning himself as the concerned husband, trying to save his wife from her own mental illness and criminal behavior. When the divorce papers were served, Thomas and Rachel would see it as a last resort, a desperate attempt to save the family business from their unstable mother. But now she knew the full scope of his plan. And she was ready to turn it against him. 3 weeks before her mother's funeral, Elias made her move. But it wasn't the move anyone expected. Instead of confronting Robert, instead of filing for divorce herself, she did something completely different. She offered him a promotion. "I've been thinking," Elias said to Robert over breakfast one morning, "maybe it's time for you to take on more responsibility at the company." Robert nearly choked on his coffee. This was not what he had expected from his wife, who had seemed distracted and withdrawn for weeks. "What do you mean?" "I mean a real partnership. Equal decision-making power. Your name on all the major accounts." Elias smiled at him across the table, the same loving smile she had given him for 22 years. "We built this business together, but I've been holding on to too much control. It's time to change that." Robert's eyes lit up with interest, though he tried to hide it. That's a big change, Elias. Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I'm sure. In fact, I think we should make it official. Legal papers, clear division of responsibilities, the whole thing. I want you to feel like a true partner, not just my husband who helps out." What Robert didn't know was that Elias had spent the last month restructuring everything. The company he thought he was about to take control of was no longer the empire it appeared to be. Working with Patricia and a team of financial experts, Elias had created a complex web of subsidiary companies, partnerships, and licensing agreements. On paper, Grainger Industries still looked impressive, a multi-million-dollar consulting firm with offices in 3 states. But in reality, most of the valuable assets had been moved into new entities that Robert had no claim to. The original Grainger Industries, the company Robert was so eager to control, was now mostly debt and overhead. The real value, the client relationships, the intellectual property, the profitable contracts, had been legally transferred to a new company called Blackstone Consulting Group. Elias owned 100% of Blackstone Consulting. She had built it using contacts and relationships that predated her marriage, making it impossible for Robert to claim any ownership rights. All the work had been done quietly, carefully, with the help of lawyers and accountants Robert had never met. "I love this idea," Robert said, barely able to contain his excitement. "When do we start? How about next week? I've already had Patricia draw up some preliminary papers. Nothing too complicated, just a clear partnership agreement that gives you equal authority over company operations." Robert was practically glowing. He thought his careful plan was succeeding beyond his wildest dreams. Not only was Elias not suspicious of his activities, she was actually handing him control of the business on a silver platter. That afternoon he called Rebecca from his office. Elias could see them through the glass walls, their heads close together as they whispered excitedly. She knew they were probably celebrating, planning their new life together as owners of a multi-million-dollar company. If only they knew what they were really inheriting. The partnership papers were signed the following week, with great ceremony. Robert insisted on taking Elias out to dinner to celebrate their new beginning. She smiled and raised her glass to toast their partnership, knowing it would be one of the last dinners they would share as husband and wife. But Robert wasn't the only one who needed to be dealt with. Elias also had to handle the problem of her children. Thomas and Rachel had been slowly turning against her, influenced by their father's careful manipulation. They no longer called her regularly, no longer asked for her advice, no longer seemed comfortable in her presence. When they did talk, their conversations were strained and awkward. Elias knew that Robert had been telling them lies about her mental state and her business practices. But she also knew her children, and she knew they were good people at heart. They were being manipulated by someone they trusted, someone who was supposed to protect them. She decided to give them one final chance to see the truth. "I want to have a family meeting," she announced at Sunday dinner. "All 4 of us. There are some things we need to discuss about the future of the business." Robert looked uncomfortable, but he couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious. Thomas and Rachel agreed, though they seemed reluctant. They met the following Saturday in the conference room at Grainger Industries. Elias had prepared a presentation, complete with financial charts and business projections. But the real message was hidden between the lines. "As you know," she began, "your father and I have decided to restructure the company. He's now an equal partner in all decision-making." She clicked to the next slide, which showed the company's current financial status. To Robert, it looked like proof of their success. To Thomas and Rachel, it looked like their inheritance was secure. But then Elias clicked to the next slide. "However," she continued, "I want you both to understand something important. The success of this business has always depended on relationships. Client relationships, vendor relationships, employee relationships. Those relationships are built on trust." She looked directly at her children. When trust is broken, relationships fall apart. And when relationships fall apart, businesses fail. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mom, what are you trying to say?" "I'm saying that success in business, like success in family, requires honesty, transparency, loyalty." She clicked to another slide. "When family members start keeping secrets from each other, when they start making plans behind each other's backs, when they stop treating each other with respect and love." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Well, that's when everything falls apart." Rachel looked confused. Robert looked increasingly nervous. Thomas looked like he was beginning to understand. "Are you talking about something specific, Mom?" Rachel asked. Elias smiled sadly. "I'm talking about the fact that your father has been having an affair with his secretary for over a year. I'm talking about the fact that he's been moving company money into accounts I don't have access to. I'm talking about the fact that he's been telling you both that I'm mentally unstable and possibly stealing from the business." The room went dead silent. "I'm talking about the fact that he's planning to divorce me, take control of the company, and leave town with Rebecca to start a new life. And I'm talking about the fact that he's convinced you both to side with him when that happens. Thomas and Rachel stared at their father in shock. Robert's face had gone pale. That's not. He stammered. It's not true. Elias clicked to the next slide, which showed printed emails between Robert and Rebecca. These are emails from your father's company account, discussing their relationship and their plans. Should I read them out loud? Robert stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Elias, you're clearly having some kind of breakdown. Kids, this is exactly what I was telling you about. Your mother is paranoid, delusional. Sit down, Robert, Elias said calmly. She clicked to another slide. These are bank records showing the transfers you've been making. And these are the divorce papers your lawyer has been preparing for the last 3 months. She looked at her children, both of whom were staring at their father with growing horror. I know this is hard to believe, she said gently. I know your father has been telling you that I'm the problem, that I'm the one who can't be trusted. But sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. Rachel started crying. Thomas looked like he was going to be sick. Dad. Thomas said, his voice barely a whisper. Is this true? Robert looked trapped, desperate. It's complicated, he said finally. Your mother and I, we've grown apart. And yes, I've developed feelings for someone else. But I never wanted to hurt anyone. I was trying to protect you both from what? Rachel demanded through her tears. From the truth. The family meeting ended with Robert storming out of the conference room, followed by Rebecca, who had been listening from the hallway. Thomas and Rachel sat in stunned silence as their father's lies unraveled before their eyes. But Elias knew this wasn't over. If anything, she had just forced Robert's hand. He would have to accelerate his timeline, strike before she could do any more damage to his plans. She was right. 2 weeks later, her mother had a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital. And 1 week after that, during the funeral, Robert served her with divorce papers in front of their entire extended family. He thought he was destroying her at her most vulnerable moment. He thought he was finally taking control. He had no idea that everything, the partnership agreement, the financial restructuring, even the timing of the confrontation, had been orchestrated by the woman he had underestimated for so long. The real game was just beginning. Despite everything Elias had revealed at the family meeting, despite the evidence she had shown them, Thomas and Rachel still chose their father's side. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. The day after the funeral, Elias returned to her empty house to find a letter waiting for her. It was from Thomas, written in his careful handwriting, the same handwriting she had helped him perfect when he was learning to write his name. Mom, the letter began, we know you're hurting right now and we're sorry about Grandma. But we can't pretend that everything is okay between us. Dad explained everything to us after that meeting at the office. He told us about your mental health issues, about how you've been acting paranoid and unstable. He showed us the medical records. Medical records? Elias felt her blood run cold. What medical records? We know you think Dad is lying to us, but we've seen the proof. The doctor's reports about your anxiety and depression. The psychiatric evaluation that recommended treatment. Dad has been trying to protect us from knowing how sick you really are. Elias sank into her kitchen chair, the letter trembling in her hands. Robert had fabricated medical records. He had created fake psychiatric evaluations. Her own children believed she was mentally ill. We love you, Mom, the letter continued, but we can't support someone who is clearly not thinking straight. Dad says you've been accusing him of terrible things, making up stories about affairs and financial crimes. He says this is part of your illness, that you can't tell the difference between reality and your paranoid fantasies. The letter went on to explain that Thomas and Rachel would be moving in with their father temporarily, until Elias got the help she needed. They hoped she would agree to treatment voluntarily, but if not, they supported their father's decision to seek legal intervention. We want our old mom back, the letter ended. The mom who was loving and stable and rational. Please get help. Please get better. We'll be waiting for you when you do. It was signed by both of them. Elias read the letter 3 times, each reading more devastating than the last. Robert hadn't just turned her children against her. He had convinced them she was insane. Every piece of evidence she had shown them, every truth she had revealed, had been reframed as the delusions of a sick woman. She called Thomas immediately. Don't call me, he said as soon as he heard her voice. Dad says you might try to manipulate us when you're having an episode. Thomas, please listen to me. I'm your mother. I'm not sick. Those medical records are fake. Mom, stop. His voice was firm but sad. This is exactly what the doctor said you would do. You would deny everything and claim that people were lying about you. It's part of your condition. What condition? What doctor? Thomas, I haven't seen a psychiatrist in my life. Dr. Harrison. Dad showed us his reports. You've been seeing him for 6 months for anxiety and paranoid delusions. He says you've been refusing medication and getting worse. Elias felt like she was falling down a rabbit hole. Thomas, I swear to you on your grandmother's grave, I have never seen a Dr. Harrison. I have never been diagnosed with any mental illness. Your father is lying to you. There was a long pause. For a moment she thought she might be getting through to him. Mom, he said finally, his voice breaking, that's exactly what someone with paranoid delusions would say. I can't do this anymore. Don't call me again until you're ready to get help. He hung up. Elias tried calling Rachel but got the same response. Her daughter was crying, begging her to please just take the medication, and please just see the doctor. When Elias insisted she wasn't sick, Rachel became more upset. You're scaring me, Mom, Rachel sobbed. You sound just like the people in those documentaries about mental illness. You really believe your own delusions. Please get help. That night, Elias sat alone in her house, surrounded by 22 years of family photos and memories. Pictures of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and family vacations. Pictures of her holding Thomas as a baby, teaching Rachel to ride a bike, celebrating graduations and achievements. All of it seemed like lies now. Had she been a good mother? Had she really raised these children who could so easily believe she was mentally ill? Had she failed them somehow, made them so willing to abandon her? The doubt crept in like poison. Maybe Robert was right. Maybe she was losing her mind. Maybe normal people didn't spend weeks investigating their husbands and building elaborate revenge plans. Maybe the evidence she thought she had found was just the product of a paranoid imagination. But then she remembered the emails, the bank records, the private investigators' reports, the fake partnership papers that had transferred the company debt to Robert while protecting her real assets. These weren't delusions, they were facts, carefully documented and legally verified. Her phone rang. It was Patricia, her lawyer. I just heard about the funeral, Patricia said. Are you okay? No, Elias said honestly. I'm not okay. He served me divorce papers at my mother's funeral, and now my children think I'm mentally ill. What do you mean? Elias explained about the fake medical records, the supposed psychiatric evaluations, the fictional Dr. Harrison who had supposedly been treating her for months. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. This is serious, Elias. Creating false medical records is a felony. If we can prove he fabricated those documents. How do we prove it? My own children believe them. They think I'm delusional. We prove it by showing that Dr. Harrison doesn't exist, or that you've never been his patient. We get your real medical records from your actual doctor. We demonstrate that these documents are forgeries. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you let Robert think his plan is working. You let him believe he's destroyed your credibility and isolated you from your children. Because the more confident he gets, the more mistakes he'll make. Patricia was right. This was still a chess game and Elias was still several moves ahead. But it was hard to remember that when she was sitting alone in an empty house, abandoned by everyone she loved. The next morning she got another shock. Thomas called, but it wasn't the call she was hoping for. Mom, I need to ask you something, he said, his voice formal and distant. Did you really steal money from the company? What? No. Thomas, where is this coming from? Dad showed me the bank records. Transfers to something called Granger Consulting. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past year. He says you created a fake company to funnel money out of Granger Industries. Elias closed her eyes. Of course. The false paper trail Robert had created was now being used against her. Thomas, those transfers were made by your father, not me. He created that consulting company to make it look like I was stealing. Mom, the records show that you're the one who authorized the transfers. Your signature is on all of them. Her signature. Robert had been getting her to sign documents for months, telling her they were routine business paperwork. She had trusted him, signed without reading every detail. Now those signatures were being used to frame her for embezzlement. He forged those signatures or he tricked me into signing papers I didn't understand, she said desperately. Mom, please stop. Just stop. Dad says the FBI might get involved if you don't return the money voluntarily. He doesn't want to press charges because you're sick, but he might not have a choice. The FBI. Robert was threatening to have her arrested for crimes he had committed, and her own son was delivering the message. Thomas, I'm begging you to listen to me. I know this sounds crazy, but your father is framing me. He's the one who moved that money. He's been planning this for months. I can't do this anymore, Thomas said, his voice breaking. I can't listen to you make these accusations against Dad. It's tearing our family apart. Our family is already torn apart. Elias cried. Your father is having an affair. He's stealing from our business. He served me divorce papers at my own mother's funeral. And that's exactly why he had to do it, Thomas replied. Because you're not capable of handling things rationally anymore. Because you're a danger to yourself and to the business. The line went dead. Elias stared at the phone in her hand, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. Her husband had betrayed her. Her children had abandoned her. Everyone she loved believed she was either a criminal or a crazy person. But she wasn't either of those things. She was a woman who had built an empire from nothing, who had raised 2 children, who had been loyal and loving for 22 years. And she was a woman who was about to prove that underestimating her was the biggest mistake Robert had ever made. She called Patricia back. It's time, she said. I'm done playing defense. Let's show them what 10 steps ahead really looks like. The next phase of her plan was about to begin. And this time she wouldn't be fighting alone. Monday morning arrived with the force of a hurricane. While Robert was probably sleeping peacefully next to Rebecca, believing he had successfully destroyed his wife's life and reputation, Elias was already at her lawyer's office at 7 a.m. Patricia had assembled a team of specialists, forensic accountants, handwriting experts, private investigators, and a criminal attorney who specialized in fraud cases. The conference room table was covered with documents, bank records, computer printouts, and photographic evidence. Are you ready for this? Patricia asked. Once we file these papers, there's no going back. This becomes a public legal battle. Elias looked at the evidence spread before her. Months of careful investigation, documentation, and preparation. I've been ready since the day I discovered his affair. Let's end this. The first set of papers was filed at 9 a.m. sharp. But these weren't just divorce papers. They were criminal fraud charges against Robert Granger and Rebecca Martinez. The charges included embezzlement, forgery, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. At 9:15, a second set of papers was filed. A civil lawsuit seeking damages for the theft of company assets and the intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit named both Robert and Rebecca as defendants and requested compensation in the millions. At 9:30, a third set of papers was filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission, reporting suspicious financial activity at Granger Industries and requesting a formal investigation. By 10 a.m., law enforcement officers were executing search warrants at Robert's office, his home, and Rebecca's apartment. They seized computers, financial records, and boxes of documents. The news media, tipped off by an anonymous source, arrived just in time to film Robert being escorted from his office building in handcuffs. Elias watched the news coverage from Patricia's office, feeling no satisfaction, only a cold sense of justice finally being served. Her phone started ringing immediately. The first call was from Thomas. Mom, what did you do? He demanded, his voice panicked. Dad's been arrested. It's all over the news. I filed charges for the crimes your father committed against me and our family, Elias said calmly. This is insane. You're destroying our family. No, Thomas. Your father destroyed our family when he chose to betray us. I'm just making sure he faces the consequences. The news is saying he stole money from the company. They're saying he forged documents. Mom, these are serious charges. Yes, they are. Because they're true. There was a long pause. You really believe Dad is a criminal? I don't believe it, Thomas. I know it. I have proof. Bank records, emails, witness statements, forensic evidence. Everything your father did to me, to our family, to our business, it's all documented. But the medical records are fake. Dr. Harrison doesn't exist. I've never been treated for mental illness. Your father created those documents to make you believe I was unstable so you would side with him in the divorce. She heard Thomas take a shaky breath. That can't be true. Check for yourself. Call the medical board. Look up Dr. Harrison's license. Verify his credentials. You'll find that he's a fictional character your father invented to manipulate you. The next call was from Rachel, who was crying so hard she could barely speak. Mom, they arrested Dad at work. Everyone saw it. It's going to be on the news. How could you do this to him? Rachel, honey, I know this is hard to understand. But your father committed serious crimes. He stole money from our business. He created fake documents. He lied to all of us for over a year. But he loves us. He would never hurt our family. He was planning to leave town with Rebecca and start a new life. He was going to take our money and abandon us. That's not love, Rachel. That's betrayal. I don't believe you. Then look at the evidence. It's all going to be public record now. Bank statements, emails, phone records. Everything he did is documented. You're tearing our family apart. Our family was already torn apart, sweetheart. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. Both calls ended with her children hanging up on her, still convinced that their mother had somehow orchestrated an elaborate conspiracy against their innocent father. But Elias knew that wouldn't last long. The evidence was too overwhelming, too well documented to ignore. By noon, the story was the lead item on every local news station. Local business owner arrested for embezzlement and fraud. The reporters had gotten hold of some of the court documents, and the details were devastating. Robert's affair with his secretary. The systematic theft of company funds. The forged medical records designed to make his wife appear mentally ill. The planned abandonment of his family. It painted a picture of a man who was not just unfaithful, but calculatingly cruel. The news reports also mentioned that Elias Granger had been cleared of any wrongdoing and was cooperating fully with the investigation. The E. Granger consulting transactions that had been used to frame her were revealed to be elaborate forgeries designed to shift blame to the victim. At 2 p.m., Patricia called with an update. Rebecca Martinez is trying to make a deal, she reported. Her lawyer says she's willing to testify against Robert in exchange for reduced charges. What kind of testimony? Everything. The affair, the financial manipulation, the fake medical records. She says Robert planned the whole thing and convinced her to go along with it. She's claiming she was manipulated by him, that she didn't understand the full scope of what they were doing. Elias felt a grim satisfaction. Honor among thieves never lasted long when the handcuffs came out. There's more, Patricia continued. The forensic accountants found additional accounts we didn't know about. Robert and Rebecca weren't just stealing from Granger Industries, they were planning to steal from your children's trust funds as well. What? Thomas and Rachel both have trust funds you set up for them when they were minors. Robert had signing authority as their father. He was in the process of liquidating those accounts when we filed the charges. Elias felt sick. Her children's college funds, their inheritances, their future security, Robert had been planning to steal it all. And Thomas and Rachel had no idea how close they had come to losing everything. At 4 p.m., she got an unexpected call. It was from Thomas, but his voice was completely different from the morning call. Quiet. Shaken. Mom, he said. I looked up Dr. Harrison. You're right. He doesn't exist. Elias closed her eyes and felt a wave of relief wash over her. I know this is hard to accept, Thomas. I called the medical board. I checked the psychiatric hospital where Dad said you were being treated. None of it is real. The medical records, the psychiatric evaluations, it's all fake. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. Mama, Rachel and I believed him. We thought you were sick. We thought you were making everything up. His voice broke. We abandoned you when you needed us most. You were manipulated by someone you trusted. That's not your fault. Yes, it is. We should have believed you. We should have listened when you tried to tell us the truth. Instead, we chose his side and left you to fight alone. Elias felt tears streaming down her face. You're my children. I love you no matter what. Nothing will ever change that. Can you forgive us? There's nothing to forgive. You were victims too. Your father lied to all of us. But even as she said the words, Elias knew that rebuilding trust with her children would take time. The wounds were deep, and the betrayal had cut in all directions. That evening, she returned to her empty house and poured herself a glass of wine. She had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. Robert would fight the charges. He would claim he was innocent, that Elias had fabricated the evidence, that this was all part of her mental illness. But she had something he didn't have, the truth. And the truth, carefully documented and legally verified, was about to destroy the man who had tried to destroy her. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. When she opened it, she saw a photo of Robert in his jail cell, taken by someone with a phone camera. He looked older, smaller, defeated. The message read, "This is just the beginning. You haven't won yet." It was from Rebecca's phone, but Elias suspected Robert had sent it. Even from jail, he was still trying to intimidate her, still trying to make her believe she wasn't safe. But Elias Granger had spent months preparing for this war, and she was just getting started. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks after Robert's arrest. In that time, the full scope of his betrayal began to unfold like a nightmare that kept getting worse. The The forensic accountants had traced the stolen money through a maze of offshore accounts, shell companies and cryptocurrency transactions. The total amount was staggering, over $2 million stolen from Granger Industries, plus another $500,000 from Thomas and Rachel's trust funds that had been intercepted just days before it would have disappeared forever. But the financial crimes were only part of the story. The FBI's computer forensics team had recovered deleted emails, text messages, and documents that painted a picture of calculated cruelty that shocked even Elias. Patricia spread the evidence across her conference table like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. "This is premeditated," she said, pointing to an email from Robert to Rebecca dated 8 months earlier. "Look at this." The email laid out their entire plan in detail. The affair was just the beginning. They had calculated exactly how much money they could steal before anyone noticed. They had researched the legal requirements for divorce proceedings. They had even planned the timing of the divorce papers to maximize Elias's emotional distress. "He wanted to serve you at your mother's funeral?" Patricia asked, reading from another email. "He thought it would break me completely," Elias said quietly. "He wanted me to be so devastated that I wouldn't fight back." And Rebecca was fully involved in all of this? The evidence showed that Rebecca had been more than just a willing participant. She had been an active strategist. Her background check had revealed a pattern of targeting wealthy, older men in previous jobs. Robert wasn't her first victim. He was just her most successful con. "She's done this before," Patricia explained. 3 times that we can document. She gets hired as a secretary or assistant, seduces the boss, and then helps him steal from his own business. When things get too risky, she disappears with her share of the money. But Robert was different, Elias realized. He was married with children. There was more to destroy. Exactly. The emails show that she actually encouraged him to turn your children against you. She thought it was funny. "Look at this message." Patricia showed her a text from Rebecca to Robert. "Your wife actually thinks Thomas and Rachel love her more than they love money. This is going to be easier than I thought." Elias felt her heart break all over again. Her children hadn't just been manipulated, they had been targeted by a woman who saw their love for their mother as a weakness to exploit. The fake medical records were another level of sophistication that shocked the investigators. Robert had somehow obtained blank forms from a legitimate psychiatric practice and had created detailed, multi-page evaluations that looked completely authentic. "He must have had inside help," the FBI agent explained to Elias. "This level of document forgery requires access to medical software, official letterhead, and detailed knowledge of psychiatric terminology." They found the answer in Robert's phone records. He had been paying a man named Dr. Stephen Walsh, a real psychiatrist who had lost his license years earlier for insurance fraud. Walsh had created the fake evaluations in exchange for $10,000 cash. "Your husband didn't just want to divorce you," Patricia explained. "He wanted to have you declared mentally incompetent. If his plan had worked, he could have had you committed to a psychiatric facility while he gained complete control of your assets." The thought made Elias physically ill. She could have ended up locked in a mental hospital, branded as insane, while Robert and Rebecca spent her money and raised her children to believe their mother was too sick to care for them. But perhaps the most devastating discovery was a document found in Rebecca's apartment. A detailed timeline of their plan that extended far into the future. After the divorce, they planned to move to Costa Rica, where extradition laws would protect them if anyone discovered the financial crimes. They had already purchased property there under false names. Robert planned to tell Thomas and Rachel that their mother had suffered a complete mental breakdown and was too dangerous to be allowed contact with them. "He was going to take your children out of the country," Patricia said. "Permanently. They would have grown up believing their mother was a dangerous, mentally ill criminal who had abandoned them." The evidence was overwhelming, but Elias knew that Robert would still fight. Men like him never accepted responsibility for their actions. They always found someone else to blame. She was right. When the preliminary hearing began, Robert's lawyer immediately went on the attack. "Your Honor," the defense attorney argued, "my client is the victim of an elaborate revenge scheme orchestrated by a woman with serious mental health issues. Mrs. Granger has spent months fabricating evidence, creating false documents, and manipulating law enforcement to destroy her husband's reputation." The lawyer presented his own evidence. Character witnesses who testified that Robert was a loving husband and father, business associates who said he was honest and trustworthy, and a psychiatrist who claimed that Elias showed signs of obsessive-compulsive behavior and paranoid delusions. But when Patricia presented the prosecution's evidence, the defense crumbled quickly. The forensic evidence was irrefutable. The deleted emails had been recovered by FBI computer experts. The financial records showed clear patterns of theft that could not be explained away. The fake medical documents had been traced directly to the disgraced psychiatrist who had already confessed to creating them. Most damaging of all was Rebecca's testimony. Facing serious federal charges of her own, she had decided to cooperate fully with the prosecution. Robert planned everything, she testified, her voice barely above a whisper. The affair was just the beginning. He wanted to destroy his wife completely, financially, emotionally, mentally. He said she had humiliated him by being more successful in business, and he wanted to make her pay for it. Did Mr. Granger ever express remorse for what he was doing to his family? The prosecutor asked. No. He said his wife and children deserved what they got. He said Elias was too trusting, too weak, and that weak people deserved to be taken advantage of. And what about the children's trust funds? He said the money was wasted on them anyway. That they were too soft, too privileged. He thought he could make better use of it. Elias watched from the gallery as her husband's true character was revealed in open court. This wasn't a man who had made mistakes or fallen into temptation. This was a predator who had systematically destroyed his own family for money and spite. Thomas and Rachel sat beside her, both crying quietly as they heard the full truth for the first time. They had come to the hearing still hoping that somehow their father would be vindicated, that this would all turn out to be a misunderstanding. Instead, they learned that the man they had trusted most in the world had been planning to steal their inheritance and take them away from their mother forever. When the hearing ended, Robert was ordered to remain in jail without bail, pending trial on multiple felony charges. As he was led away in handcuffs, he looked directly at Elias for the first time since his arrest. There was no remorse in his eyes. No apology. No acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. There was only hatred, pure, undiluted hatred for the woman who had refused to be destroyed. This isn't over, he mouthed silently. But Elias was no longer afraid of his threats. She had survived his worst attacks and emerged stronger. Now it was time to rebuild her life and her family. The truth had finally emerged, and with it came the possibility of healing. The news of Robert's arrest and the details of his crimes spread through their social and business circles like wildfire. Within days, everything he had worked to build, his reputation, his business relationships, his standing in the community began to collapse. Granger Industries lost 3 major clients in the first week after the story broke. Business partners who had worked with Robert for years quietly severed their relationships. The country club where he had been a member for 15 years revoked his membership. Even the charity boards he had served on distanced themselves from the scandal. But for Elias, watching Robert's empire crumble was less satisfying than she had expected. There was no joy in seeing someone's life destroyed, even someone who had tried to destroy hers. Instead, she felt only a tired sense of justice finally being served. The real work now was rebuilding. Rebuilding her business, rebuilding her relationship with her children, and rebuilding her own sense of self after months of being told she was crazy, criminal, or both. The business side was actually the easiest part. Blackstone Consulting Group, the company she had quietly established during her months of preparation, was thriving. All the valuable contracts, client relationships, and intellectual property that had made Granger Industries successful had been legally transferred to her new company before Robert's arrest. "You were brilliant," Patricia told her during one of their regular meetings. "While he was trying to steal from Granger Industries, you were creating an entirely new company that he had no claim to." "I learned from the best," Elias replied. "Robert taught me never to trust anyone completely, including your spouse." The original Granger Industries was now little more than an empty shell: office leases, employee contracts, and business debts. Robert's partnership agreement had made him equally responsible for all of it, which meant he was now personally liable for hundreds of thousands of dollars in obligations. But the financial victory felt hollow compared to the emotional work of reconnecting with Thomas and Rachel. Her children were struggling with guilt, shame, and confusion. They had sided with their father against their mother, only to discover that everything they believed was based on lies. The betrayal cut in all directions. They felt betrayed by their father, ashamed of their choices, and uncertain whether their mother could ever forgive them. "I keep thinking about all the times you tried to tell us the truth," Rachel said during one of their difficult conversations. We couldn't believe that Dad would lie to us about something so serious." "You trusted someone you loved," Elias replied. "That's not a weakness. That's what family is supposed to do." "But we chose him over you," Thomas added, his voice heavy with regret. "When you needed us most, we abandoned you." "You were manipulated by an expert," Elias said firmly. Your father spent months planning how to turn you against me. He used your love for him as a weapon. That's not your fault. But forgiveness was easier to offer than trust was to rebuild. Thomas and Rachel wanted to make amends, but they were also wrestling with the realization that they didn't really know their father at all. If he could lie so completely about their mother, what else had he lied about over the years? I keep thinking about all the times he said he was working late, Rachel confided. All the business trips. All the times he said he was in meetings. How much of it was lies? The answer, as they discovered through the FBI investigation, was most of it. Robert had been living a double life for at least 2 years, maybe longer. The affair with Rebecca was just the latest in a series of betrayals that stretched back through their entire childhood. He never really loved us, did he? Thomas asked one day. Not if he was willing to steal our inheritance and take us away from you forever. It was a heartbreaking question, and Elias didn't have a good answer. How do you explain to your children that their father saw them as possessions to be controlled rather than people to be loved? I think your father loved the idea of having a family, she said carefully. He loved the image of being a successful businessman with a beautiful wife and accomplished children. But I don't think he understood what real love requires: sacrifice, honesty, putting other people's needs before your own. The hardest part was watching her children grapple with their own choices. They had to live with the knowledge that they had rejected their mother during the most difficult period of her life. They had to accept that they had been fooled by someone they trusted completely. How do we make this right? Rachel asked. How do we prove to you that we're sorry? You don't have to prove anything, Elias said. You're my children. I love you unconditionally. But rebuilding trust takes time. We all have to be patient with the process. The process was complicated by the ongoing legal proceedings. Robert's criminal trial was scheduled for 6 months away, and his divorce lawyers were fighting viciously to claim as much of the marital assets as possible. He's claiming that Blackstone Consulting is marital property, Patricia explained during one of their strategy sessions. His lawyers are arguing that you used marital funds and company resources to start the new business. That's ridiculous. I used my own contacts and relationships. I invested my own money. We know that and we can prove it. But he's going to fight for everything. The house, the cars, the investment accounts. He wants half of everything even though he stole millions from the business. Let him fight, Elias said calmly. I have something he doesn't have, the truth. The truth was indeed powerful. As more evidence emerged during discovery, the scope of Robert's deception became even clearer. He had been systematically looting their joint assets for over 3 years, not just the past 18 months. Money from their retirement accounts, their children's college funds, even the life insurance policies. Everything had been quietly redirected into accounts that only he controlled. He was planning this divorce for years, Patricia realized. This wasn't a midlife crisis or a crime of passion. This was a long-term strategy to leave you with nothing. The revelation was both shocking and somehow liberating. It meant that Elias hadn't failed as a wife or missed obvious warning signs. Her husband had been a calculating criminal who had fooled everyone, including their closest friends and family members. As Robert's trial date approached, more of his business associates came forward with their own stories of betrayal. He had embezzled money from business partners, cheated clients on contract terms, and lied to investors about company performance. The man who had seemed so successful and trustworthy had actually been running elaborate cons for years. He's going to prison for a long time, Patricia predicted. The federal charges alone carry a minimum of 10 years. Add in the state charges for forgery and fraud, and he's looking at 20 to 30 years. It should have felt like victory, but Elias mostly felt exhausted. The man she had loved and trusted for over 2 decades was a stranger, a criminal who had seen her and their children as marks to be conned rather than family to be loved. The only consolation was that his schemes had ultimately failed. She had protected her assets, saved her children's inheritance, and exposed his crimes before he could disappear with everything they had worked for. But the cost had been enormous. Her marriage was over. Her children were traumatized. Her faith in human nature was permanently damaged. As she sat in her empty house one evening, reading through the latest legal documents, Elias wondered if winning was supposed to feel this lonely. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Mom, Thomas and I want to take you to dinner this weekend. We know we have a lot of work to do to rebuild our relationship, but we want to start trying. For the first time in months, Elias smiled genuinely. Maybe winning wasn't about destroying your enemies. Maybe it was about saving the people you loved and finding a way to move forward together. The empire Robert had tried to steal was crumbling around him. But the family he had tried to destroy was beginning to heal. The dinner with Thomas and Rachel was awkward at first. They met at a small restaurant across town, far from anywhere they might run into friends or family who knew about the scandal. Everyone was walking on eggshells, afraid of saying the wrong thing or opening old wounds. "Thank you for coming," Thomas said as they sat down. "We know we don't deserve another chance, but—" "Stop," Elias interrupted gently. "We're family. Family doesn't keep score of who deserves what. We just love each other and try to do better." Rachel started crying immediately. "I missed you so much, Mom. These past few months not talking to you, thinking you were sick, it was the worst time of my life." "Mine too," Elias admitted. "Losing your father was terrible, but losing you too was unbearable." They talked for 3 hours that night, finally sharing the truth about what everyone had experienced during those horrible months. Thomas and Rachel described the confusion and fear they had felt as their father systematically turned them against their mother. They talked about the fake medical records that had seemed so convincing, the financial evidence that had painted Elias as a thief, and the constant pressure to choose sides. "He made it seem like loving you meant betraying him," Rachel explained. "Like we couldn't be loyal to both of you. He said you were sick and that the kindest thing we could do was support his decision to get you help. Even when you tried to tell us the truth at that family meeting," Thomas added, "he had an explanation for everything. He said you were having delusions, that you believed your own lies. He made us feel like confronting you would just make your condition worse." Elias listened without judgment, even though their words cut deep. She could see how her children had been manipulated by someone they trusted completely. Robert had used their love for both parents as a weapon against them. "The hardest part," Thomas continued, "was feeling like we were losing both parents at the same time. Dad told us you were too sick to be around us safely, but he also said he might have to leave town for business. We thought we were going to end up orphans." "He was planning to take you with him," Elias said quietly. "To Costa Rica. Permanently. You would have grown up believing I was too dangerous or too crazy to see you." Both children stared at her in shock. This was the first time they had heard about Robert's plan to leave the country with them. "He was going to kidnap us?" Rachel whispered. "Legally it wouldn't have been kidnapping. If I had been declared mentally incompetent, he would have had complete custody rights. You were both adults, but he was counting on the fact that you believed his lies about me." The revelation hit them like a physical blow. They had thought their father was protecting them from an unstable mother. In reality, he had been planning to isolate them from their entire support system and take them to a foreign country where they would have been completely dependent on him. "We're so sorry, Mom," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "We should have trusted you. We should have questioned what he was telling us. We should have been smarter. You were loving children who trusted your father. That's exactly what you should have been. The fault lies with him, not with you." But even as she said the words, Elias knew that rebuilding their relationship would take time. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. Thomas and Rachel would have to live with the knowledge that they had abandoned their mother when she needed them most. And Elias would have to work through her own hurt and disappointment. The healing process was complicated by the ongoing legal battles. Robert's criminal trial was still months away, but the divorce proceedings were moving forward. His lawyers were fighting viciously for every asset, every penny, every piece of property. "He wants half the house," Patricia reported during one of their meetings. "Half your retirement accounts, half your investment portfolio. He's claiming that since he was an equal partner in the business, he's entitled to half of everything you built together." "What about the money he stole?" "His lawyers are claiming those were legitimate business expenses or advances against his share of the company. They're trying to reframe his crimes as civil disputes rather than criminal acts." The legal maneuvering was exhausting and expensive, but Elias had two advantages. First, she had the truth on her side, documented evidence of Robert's crimes that no amount of clever lawyering could explain away. Second, she had prepared for this battle long before Robert knew it was coming. The partnership agreement he had signed so eagerly, thinking it gave him control of Granger Industries, actually made him responsible for all the company's debts and liabilities. While he was in jail, those debts were mounting daily. Office leases, employee salaries, equipment payments, all of it was his responsibility now. Meanwhile, Blackstone Consulting was thriving. Elias had successfully moved all the profitable clients and contracts to her new company, leaving Robert with an empty shell that was bleeding money every day. "He's actually losing money by fighting this divorce," Patricia explained with some satisfaction. "Every day he spends in jail, his financial position gets worse. His share of Granger Industries is now worth less than the debt he owes." But the real victory wasn't financial, it was personal. Slowly, carefully, Elias was rebuilding her relationships with her children. Thomas started calling her every few days just to check in and see how she was doing. The conversations were stilted at first, full of careful politeness and unspoken apologies. But gradually they began to sound more natural, more like the easy relationship they had shared before Robert's manipulation drove them apart. Rachel was struggling more with the guilt and shame. She had always been Daddy's little girl, and learning that her father was a criminal who had planned to destroy their family was devastating. She started seeing a therapist to work through her feelings of betrayal and confusion. "I keep thinking about all the times he hugged me and told me he loved me," she confided to Elias during one of their weekly coffee dates. "Were any of those moments real? Did he ever actually love me, or was I just part of his plan?" It was a heartbreaking question, and one that Elias struggled to answer honestly. "I think your father loved you in the only way he was capable of loving anyone," she said carefully. "But his love was selfish. He loved you because you made him look good, because you reflected well on him. Real love means wanting what's best for someone even when it's hard for you. Like how you forgave us even though we hurt you? You're my children. Forgiving you wasn't hard, it was automatic. The hard part is trusting that we won't hurt each other again." The trust building was a delicate process. Thomas and Rachel wanted to prove their loyalty, but they were also afraid of being manipulated again. They had learned the hard way that people they loved could lie to them convincingly, and that realization made them question everything. "How do we know you're telling us the truth now?" Thomas asked during one particularly difficult conversation. "How do we know you're not just better at manipulation than Dad was?" It was a fair question, and Elias didn't take offense. "You don't know," she said simply. "You have to make a choice about who to trust, just like you did before. But this time you have more information. You can verify what I tell you. You can ask for evidence. You can think critically about whether my actions match my words. And if we choose wrong again, then we'll deal with it together. But Thomas, you can't live your life afraid to trust anyone. That's not living, that's just surviving." The children were also dealing with the public nature of their father's crimes. The story had been covered extensively in the local media, and everyone in their social circle knew what had happened. Friends didn't know how to act around them. Colleagues at work whispered behind their backs. Dating became complicated when potential partners Googled their last name and found articles about their father's arrest. "I'm thinking about changing my name," Rachel mentioned one day. "I don't want to be associated with him anymore." "That's your choice," Elias said. "But remember, your name doesn't define you. Your actions do. You're not responsible for what your father did. But I am responsible for what I did. For how I treated you. Yes, you are. And you're taking responsibility by trying to make things right. That's what matters now." As the months passed, their relationship slowly healed. The conversations became easier, the silences less awkward. Thomas started dropping by the house on weekends, just like he used to before everything fell apart. Rachel began calling Elias when she had problems at work or questions about life, seeking the motherly advice she had rejected for so long. But the real breakthrough came 6 months after Robert's arrest, when both children made a decision that surprised everyone. "We want to testify at Dad's trial," Thomas announced during Sunday dinner at Elias's house. "Not for the prosecution or the defense, just to tell the truth about what happened to our family." "Are you sure?" Elias asked. "It will be hard, painful, and it will be public." "We're sure," Rachel said firmly. "We want people to understand what he did to us. How he turned us against you. How he almost destroyed our family with his lies. And we want him to hear it from us," Thomas added. "We want him to know that his plan failed. That we see him for who he really is now." The decision to testify was brave and healing, but it also meant reliving the worst months of their lives in open court. It meant admitting publicly that they had been fooled by their own father, that they had abandoned their mother when she needed them most. But it also meant taking control of their own narrative. Instead of being passive victims of their father's manipulation, they were choosing to speak their truth and reclaim their power. "I'm proud of you both," Elias told them. "Whatever you decide to say, however you choose to handle this, I'm proud of the adults you've become." The trial was still 2 months away, but the family was finally ready to face it together. They had survived Robert's worst attacks and emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. The man who had tried to destroy them had only succeeded in showing them how much they meant to each other. The courtroom was packed for Robert's sentencing hearing. 18 months after his arrest, he had been convicted on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and identity theft. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding him guilty of systematically stealing from his own family and business. Elias sat in the front row with Thomas and Rachel, watching as the man she had loved for over 20 years was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He looked older, grayer, diminished by his time in jail. But when his eyes met hers, she saw the same calculating coldness that had characterized his betrayal. The prosecution had presented a devastating case. Financial records, computer evidence, testimony from Rebecca and other accomplices. Everything painted a picture of a man who had spent years planning the destruction of his own family for personal gain. Rebecca had been sentenced 3 months earlier after pleading guilty to conspiracy charges. She received 5 years in prison and was ordered to pay restitution to the victims. Her testimony against Robert had been crucial to the prosecution's case, revealing the depth of planning and malice behind his actions. But today belonged to Robert's victims, his family. Thomas was the first to speak during the victim impact portion of the hearing. He stood at the podium, his voice steady despite the emotion in his words. "Your Honor, Robert Granger isn't just my father, he was my hero growing up. I wanted to be like him, to have his success in business, his confidence, his apparent love for our family. Learning that he had been lying to us for years, that he had planned to steal our inheritance and take us away from our mother forever, was devastating." Thomas paused, gathering himself before continuing. "But the worst part wasn't the money he stole or even the lies he told. The worst part was how he turned me and my sister against our mother during the hardest time of her life. He convinced us that she was mentally ill, that she was a danger to our family. We abandoned her when she needed us most because we believed his lies." He looked directly at Robert, who was staring straight ahead, showing no emotion. "I have to live with that for the rest of my life. I have to live with the knowledge that I chose to believe a criminal over the woman who raised me, loved me, and sacrificed everything for our family. That's a burden I'll carry forever, and it's a burden you gave me." Rachel spoke next, her voice breaking with emotion as she described the impact of her father's crimes on their family. "You didn't just steal money from us," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You stole our childhood memories, our sense of security, our ability to trust the people we love. You made us doubt our own mother, doubt ourselves, doubt everything we thought we knew about our family." She wiped her eyes and continued. "But you also taught us something valuable, even if you didn't mean to. You taught us the difference between real love and selfish love. Real love protects people even when it's hard. Real love tells the truth even when it's painful. Real love puts other people's needs first." She looked at Elias, then back at Robert. "Mom showed us real love by forgiving us even after we hurt her. By fighting for our family even when we didn't support her. By protecting our inheritance even when we didn't believe we needed protection. You showed us selfish love by putting your own desires ahead of everything and everyone else." Finally, it was Elias's turn to speak. She had written and rewritten her statement dozens of times, trying to find words that could capture the scope of Robert's betrayal and its impact on their family. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and strong, "for 22 years, I believed I was married to a man who loved me, who loved our children, who was building a life and a business with me. I now know that I was married to a stranger, a man who saw his family not as people to be loved, but as assets to be controlled and eventually discarded." She looked at Robert, who was finally meeting her gaze. "You almost succeeded in destroying everything we built together. You almost convinced our children that their mother was insane. You almost stole their inheritance and their future. You almost tore our family apart forever." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "But you failed. You failed because you underestimated the strength of real love, real loyalty, real family bonds. You failed because truth is more powerful than lies, no matter how carefully those lies are constructed. And you failed because you forgot that the woman you were trying to destroy was the same woman who built our business empire from nothing." Elias felt a sense of peace as she spoke. For months she had carried anger, hurt, and betrayal. But standing in that courtroom, seeing Robert reduced to what he truly was, a petty criminal in an orange jumpsuit, she felt those negative emotions beginning to fade. "I don't forgive you," she continued. "What you did to our family is unforgivable. But I don't hate you either. I pity you. You had everything, a successful business, a loving family, children who adored you. And you threw it all away for money and the thrill of deceiving people who trusted you." The judge listened to all the victim impact statements before delivering his sentence. Robert received 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 15 years. At 53 years old, he would likely spend the rest of his productive life behind bars. As Robert was led away, he turned one last time to look at his family. Elias expected to see anger or defiance in his eyes. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like regret. But it was too little, too late. Outside the courthouse, the media was waiting for statements. Thomas and Rachel had prepared brief comments about justice being served and their family moving forward. But Elias declined to speak to reporters. She had said everything she needed to say in the courtroom. What now? Rachel asked as they walked to their cars. Now we live our lives, Elias replied. We build new memories to replace the ones he tainted. We learn to trust again, carefully but completely. We move forward. That evening, the three of them had dinner at Elias's house, a house that was truly hers now, free of Robert's presence and influence. They talked about the future, about Thomas's new job, about Rachel's graduate school plans, about Elias's growing business. Are you going to start dating again? Thomas asked, a question that surprised everyone, including himself. Elias laughed. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm focused on rebuilding our family and growing my business. Romance can wait. You deserve to be happy, Mom, Rachel said. You deserve to find someone who actually loves you the way you deserve to be loved. I am happy, Elias replied, and she meant it. I have my children back. I have a successful business. I have my health and my freedom. Everything else is just bonus. 6 months later, Blackstone Consulting had expanded to 4 states and was being recognized as one of the fastest-growing firms in their industry. Elias had been featured on the cover of several business magazines, not as a victim of crime, but as a successful entrepreneur who had overcome adversity. Thomas and Rachel were both thriving in their careers and had rebuilt close relationships with their mother. They still carried some guilt about their choices during the crisis, but they had learned to channel that guilt into determination to be better people, better family members. The house where Elias had raised her family was filled with laughter again. Sunday dinners became a tradition. Holiday celebrations were joyful rather than strained. The family photos on the walls told a story of healing and renewal. One Sunday afternoon, as she was working in her garden, Elias's phone rang. It was an unknown number, but when she answered, she heard a familiar voice. This is a call from a federal correctional facility. You have a collect call from Robert Granger. Will you accept the charges? Elias stared at the phone for a long moment. Robert was calling her from prison, probably wanting to apologize or manipulate, or make one last attempt to control the narrative of their relationship. No, she said simply and hung up. Some doors once closed should stay closed forever. That evening, Thomas called with news that made her smile. Mom, I have something to tell you. I've been seeing someone. Her name is Jessica, and she's wonderful. I think you'd really like her. I'd love to meet her, Elias said. Bring her to Sunday dinner next week. Are you sure you're ready for that? Meeting my girlfriend? Thomas, I'm ready for whatever comes next. We've survived the worst thing that could happen to our family. Everything else is just life, and life is good. As she hung up the phone, Elias looked around her quiet house and felt genuinely content for the first time in years. She had lost a husband, but she had gained her self-respect. She had lost a marriage, but she had saved her family. She had lost her innocence about human nature, but she had gained wisdom about the difference between real love and selfish love. Robert had tried to destroy her by serving divorce papers at her mother's funeral. He had tried to break her spirit at her most vulnerable moment. Instead, he had only revealed his own weakness and cruelty. And in doing so, he had freed her to build a better life than she had ever imagined possible. Elias Granger had been 10 steps ahead all along. But more importantly, she had learned that the best revenge wasn't destroying your enemies, it was building a life so good that their absence made it even better. The story that had begun with betrayal and heartbreak at a funeral had ended with healing, justice, and hope for the future. Sometimes that's the best kind of happy ending.